Hi, my name is Ophi YouTube Videos. I am a feminist and a lesbian, and I make conversational commentary videos about both of those things in a development that is probably bad news for me, but maybe good news for you. I have spent the last week absolutely glued to the headlines that are trickling out about the Justin Baldoni Blake Lively fallout after her complaint that was filed, and I'm here to report back. In case you missed it, this last Sunday I made a video where I went over Blake Lively's 80-page complaint against Justin Baldoni, Wayfarer Studios, and a few others. I've read almost the entire thing because I can't do anything about the amount of people who will make their opinions on these things based on YouTube videos and not based on reading it themselves, and I just can do something about there not being a lot of them that will use big girl words to describe what happened and not condense it down to algorithm and or audience friendly terms like unsafe vibes. If you appreciate that I do not subscribe to that whole talking around things game, maybe consider subscribing to me. We just hit 10,000 subscribers here in the Nuance Corner, which is very deeply exciting to me. Thank you so much to everybody who has already subscribed. And especially given the flood of videos that came out this summer participating in what we now know was a manufactured Blake Lively hate train, I just want there to be somebody giving updates on this situation who doesn't hate women and can't be convinced to hate women by a good PR campaign. So, it's me. Hi. I also mentioned I'm going to be keeping an eye on stuff. This is not going to be my last update video about this. I am so sure more will happen, and I also have another video in the works where I'm talking about a lot of these same subjects. And that's a separate thing from my Baldoni deep dive, which I mentioned in the last video, and I'm still planning on doing in the coming year. I'm making a playlist. You can find it linked in the description below. As of right now, it is just my original video from August when I was first starting to suspect that this would happen. Another video about a hate train against a woman that I made a month ago where I mentioned the 2-hour participation of the Blake Lively hate train by another YouTuber, and did catch a little bit of flack for it, but by a couple of people who came back and apologized to me, so I appreciate that. It's totally fine to have been wrong. It just matters that you don't want to continue to be wrong, right? Anyway, I have that video and the video I already mentioned where I was going over the complaint all in that playlist, and I'm also going to toss future videos, including this one, up on that, so maybe follow that playlist. I don't really know how playlists work, but I do have a lot of playlists where I organize my content. But just in case you have missed all of those videos and also all of the conversation going around about this subject on the internet, I would like to start this video with a summary. You likely know or have picked up on a lot of this, but just for the sake of laying it all out, this summer, a movie adaptation of Colleen Hoover's best-selling romance novel It Ends With Us was released. The adaptation was produced and directed by Justin Baldoni, whose company Wayfarer bought the adaptation rights from Colleen Hoover, and Blake Lively signed on as the lead role. Colleen Hoover's books are bestsellers, as mentioned. They are widely beloved and also very widely criticized for their depictions of and sometimes romanticization of domestic abuse. The marketing for the movie drew criticism because it, like marketing for Colleen's very, very successful novels, took a very lighthearted and floral tone. That is until roughly around the time that people started to speculate in a rift in the cast, because members of the cast would not be photographed with their director, Justin Baldoni, were not appearing with him in press for the movie, and did not follow him on social media. Justin Baldoni then made a hard pivot in the marketing of the movie, abandoning his previous participation in their pop-up floral shops, and instead milking and exploiting real-life stories of domestic abuse survivors. He used this to bolster himself even further as this feminist and activist, while tabloid rumors swelled in the background. Some complaints were made louder than others, like all of the complaints about Blake Lively. More quiet ones that Blake Lively had been made to feel uncomfortable while she was filming with Justin Baldoni, that he had made her uncomfortable also about her postpartum body and not just by lingering during kissing scenes, and that Justin had asked a trainer how quickly Blake could lose weight after she gave birth. That last one was explained away by him being really concerned about a scene in the movie where he had to lift her, a scene that does not exist in the movie or apparently in the screenplay either. And even if it did, he really seriously could have just gotten a stunt double. He is the director, so if he's that worried about his poor back, simply do not lift her. Blake Lively stuck with the original marketing plan, which I have tried not to jump around too much, even though we now know a lot more than we knew in August at the time of all of this. But we do now need to go into some things that were going on in the background that were only recently made public because of Blake's complaint against Wayfarer, which was only just made public last week. In that complaint, we learned that the marketing plan, floral and lighthearted and not really talking about domestic violence unless they were asked to, was something Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni both signed on to, as laid out by the distributing studio. We didn't know that at the time, of course, so a lot of people fell for this story that started to circulate about how Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni were in conflict behind the scenes, but it was actually over creative control of the film. Then the final version that was distributed by Sony was Blake's cut, which is apparently a power imbalance because, well, okay, so we have to ignore the fact that Justin's studio produced it and that he owned that studio and the rights to this adaptation. And also that Blake didn't have a production credit during filming, so it's not like she was taking over during actual filming. It's just that she made a cut that the studio liked more after the fact, which is how she got her producer credit. Ignore all of that. Focus only on what we were told, which is that Justin Baldoni is just a poor, soaking wet little meow meow. A lot of people fully bought into that. The power imbalance was that she is more famous, and it's obviously a power imbalance that did not stop him from trying to take out a smear campaign against her, so I don't know how real that power imbalance possibly could have been. It doesn't seem to be the case, though, that while I'm sure Baldoni was pissed about that cut Blake made, that was their conflict during filming. That conflict seems to have been much less about creative directions and much more about Blake Lively insisting on basic workplace protections for herself and for the other members of the cast, especially female ones. Blake wasn't making demands at that point about putting a Taylor Swift song in. It was more about Blake Lively insisting on basic workplace protections from things like repeated sexual harassment and a working environment that abided by neither the SAG AFTRA nudity rider guidelines or by the industry standard practice of having an intimacy coordinator present for all intimate scenes, during which Baldoni would allegedly improvise and linger. So Blake's complaint gets into not only documentation of those working conditions and what she did to try to fight against them, but also into actual evidence that at least some of the wide online backlash against her had been seeded or amplified by a crisis PR team that Baldoni hired, and that all of that was retaliatory for her reporting the sexual harassment that she had been receiving on set. I do want to get into that on-set harassment, though I will say you should either read it for yourself, preferably, or listen to my video where I read most of it out loud for you. Just a quick little primer, though, in case you're saving that for after this video. Lively's complaints include, as mentioned, improvisation during kissing scenes without the intimacy coordinator present, or it is unclear how present intimacy coordinators even were at the beginning of filming, attempting to add extra sex scenes, including with the actress who portrayed the younger version of Lily, after which he allegedly told the actors portraying the younger versions of those characters that their portrayal of the sex scene he added was hot, and asked them if they had practiced ahead of time. Also, Blake's insistence for the nudity writers makes sense, even disregarding the need for intimacy coordinators, when you hear the details of filming about a birth scene during which she was pressured into nudity that was not present in the script she agreed upon, a scene that didn't take place on a closed set, and that Baldoni hired one of his closest friends to play a small role during. Other complaints include things like being shown a video of producer Jamie Heath's wife giving birth, being told about Jamie and his bestie Justin Baldoni's sex lives with their partners, as well as their previous pornography addictions, a thing Baldoni has spoken about in public, so I don't believe he wouldn't speak about on set of a film. And also that Baldoni had a conversation with Lively where he spoke about his own sexual assault, as well as times that he may not have asked for consent from sexual partners, which is actually just rape. He was admitting to sexual assault. And I'll note this is mentioned in the complaint with Lively's driver as a witness, which I have to assume means they have already asked him if he's willing to back this up when this inevitably goes to court. I don't think that they would have publicized this complaint so widely if they didn't know they had stuff to back it all up. And also, I just believe Baldoni would say this. And I believe this because it is extremely consistent with the one single episode of Man Enough I have ever seen, where he offered Drake Bell essentially the same excuse, but plug in Drake's specific trauma versus Justin's. There are other complaints as well. I'm not getting into all of them because, again, you should just go read it for yourself or at least listen to my video. But there are also claims that Baldoni would claim to have a relationship with and speak to Blake Lively's recently deceased father, and just all other manner of inappropriateness on the set, as well as Lively's dressing room being barged into while she's in varying states of undress, her not being given breaks to breastfeed. It is a lot of really bad stuff. Essentially, Blake threatened to walk away and did not because a list of conditions were agreed upon. And I do want to talk about Blake's conditions, her return to set protections after she had essentially threatened to walk away due to the filming environment prior to the Writers Guild and SAG AFTRA strikes that halted production. The conditions are essentially that all the previously mentioned conduct would stop, that she and other performers on the set would be protected by intimacy coordinators, and that she would be granted a representative with her on set, most likely her husband Ryan Reynolds, who was at the meeting where the production company signed and agreed to all of this. And I do want to mention that they signed and agreed to all of this because I think it's kind of ridiculous to believe that the production company would be dumb enough to sign something that agrees to all of this as if it had not already been a given, if it was already all a given. Like, I feel like if they already had intimacy coordinators there, it would say we will continue to always have intimacy coordinators present, because Blake made it very clear she was reserving her right to sue. So I think that if I was going to take this in any way other than just believing Blake, it would have required for Wayfarer to do something even slightly tricky, like trying to say, oh, we will continue to abide by the previously signed nudity riders, but those clearly didn't exist, which tells me Justin Baldoni had no fucking idea what he was doing running this set that he kept running his mouth about was for a movie that was for the female gaze or whatever. So Wayfarer, Baldoni, Heath, everyone, they all signed to a bunch of stuff agreeing to Blake's claims, basically making all these new rules partway through production that never should have had to be specified in the first place, in my opinion. And the thing they signed also said that they could not retaliate against Blake Lively for any of her repeated attempts to make HR complaints. But they sure fucking did. Baldoni's aforementioned hard pivot during the promotion of It Ends With Us, we now know, came not long after he retained the services of a crisis PR team. Not just any crisis PR team, but Melissa Nathan, who represented Johnny Depp and helped to bring about the smear campaign against Amber Heard when Depp sued her for defamation. Baldoni was already represented by Jennifer Abel, and it is largely through text messages through Jennifer Abel and Melissa Nathan, obtained via a subpoena on Abel's former workplace, including a phone that she willingly returned after being fired that she had been texting all kinds of incriminating shit on. Shit that has now come out in 2 different legal complaints. The New York Times article, We Can Bury Anybody, lays out the first legal complaint just beautifully. You can find a link to that and to all of the other articles that I'm about to get into reading from in this coming video in the description below. But that essentially catches you up to where we were last Sunday, and this is purportedly an update video, so what are the updates? I think since a lot of us have been repeating to each other that Blake Lively has a less than stellar reputation, because that's what Melissa Nathan told us to think, and because Armie Hammer, of all people, tried to pin him being fired from Gossip Girl on Blake during a late night show appearance a few years ago, which resurfaced, I would like to start with people who have lended Blake their support. Also, I just want to say again, in case that was too quick of a little gloss over there, it was largely coming from an Armie Hammer interview, where people were saying that she's some ridiculous diva. Armie Hammer, not a man I would believe over literally any woman. I've gotten comments referencing him saying that, and also referencing Leighton Meester, who played Blair in Gossip Girl, and claiming that she didn't like Blake, who played Serena. I tried to find any kind of evidence of beef or drama between the two of them, and the only thing I could find was a write-up from this summer where somebody else was trying to figure out the source of that drama. And all I found was a quote where the director of Gossip Girl said that those two women weren't friends in real life. I have not found either a clip or a post or a tweet of Leighton Meester speaking negatively about Blake Lively. And nobody who has ever cited, oh, Leighton Meester already told us all about Blake Lively, has ever actually provided me with a source to any of those things, so I kind of think it maybe doesn't exist. Personally, I also have a lot of former colleagues who I was not friends with when we worked together and am not friends with now, a lot of whom are people who I have nothing negative to say about and who, I would hope don't have anything too negative to say about me either. But in case they don't, I guess you can go cancel me for being a mean girl. I would kind of love to know how widely beloved all of these people who have been gleeful to cancel Blake Lively for being a mean girl are by their colleagues from when they were in their 20s. But I guess I'll never know, since nobody's pumping hundreds of thousands of dollars into a smear campaign against those people. But now that the smear campaign has been made public, there have been statements made in support of Blake. As of scripting, December 27th, I have not seen any write-ups about celebrities posting to support Baldoni. Not that I haven't seen write-ups about Baldoni, I certainly have, we'll get into those soon, but I'm not seeing people rush to rally around him for this shit. Especially, and you won't be surprised by this if you've been paying any attention so far, not the cast of the movie he directed. We learned in the complaint that it wasn't just Blake who informed Sony that she would not appear with Justin during promotional material for the film. That appears to have been a decision made by multiple members of the cast, which included Jenny Slate. And I am starting with Jenny Slate here for two reasons. One, because I respect Jenny Slate more than I respect literally anybody else involved with this adaptation on any level. And two, because in my impression of all of this, a lot of the It Ends With Us drama did kind of start with her in a way. I only saw things start to be actively speculated on because of something Jenny Slate said at the premiere of the It Ends With Us movie when she was asked what it was like to work with Justin Baldoni as her scene partner. He plays her brother in the movie. And I described this comment from Jenny, which I'm about to play for you, as at the time when I made my first video, I described it as a pretty masterful dodge. And I read it even more so that way now than I did at the time, because at the time I wasn't really sure whether or not it meant anything, and as mentioned by a commenter on my original video, it does kind of give the sense of like, maybe Jenny Slate was bored by being asked about a man. But this was, I think, kind of, I don't know, the first shot fired? This was to It Ends With Us promo, as like Olivia Wilde's no assholes policy talk on the press tour for Don't Worry Darling was. A thing that strikes you as it's happening that is probably going to be relevant later, but that you really cannot tell the exact way is going to end up being real-life foreshadowing. And I mean, of course, this clip.
Talk to me, what was that like, having him be director but also scene partner?
I mean, what an intense job. Like to have to do so many things. I just found myself being like, wow, I really just want to have one job at once. Like yeah. And in fact, I've often felt that way. Like I really like writing and I like it so much, and it's special to be able to be a writer. But like, yeah, I was looking around just being like, I'm good with just acting. I really love it. I just want to do it. I feel like I've only begun.
But there's also more that makes me think that too. Something that I keep coming back to the more I think about this is that Jenny Slate, despite being the one who pinged my radar that there was something going on here, managed to completely and totally stay out of the drama after that. I didn't see any negative press about Jenny Slate. I didn't see people saying Jenny was hard to work with or unreasonable. The worst thing I think I've seen anybody imply about Jenny over all of this is that she, by saying what she did rather than praising Justin in that interview, had been bought and paid for by Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, who were stealing the movie away, blah blah blah, poor little meow meow, etc., etc. But as mentioned, I respect Jenny Slate more than I respect anybody involved with this adaptation or with its source material. I respect her enough that I've always thought it's sort of wild that she ended up being part of this movie. And Jenny Slate, despite managing to stay out of it and not get negative press attention during this whole cycle, made a statement in support of Blake this week. And she said, "As Blake Lively's castmate and friend, I voice my support as she takes action against those reported to have planned and carried out an attack on her reputation," Slate said. "Blake is a leader, loyal friend, and a trusted source of emotional support for me and so many who know and love her." She continued, "What has been revealed about the attack on Blake is terribly dark, disturbing, and wholly threatening. I commend my friend, I admire her bravery, and I stand by her side." I'm really heartened by this, actually. I love Jenny Slate, and I think it was really brave of her to put herself back in it when she really kind of dodged it this summer and could have continued to stay out of it. Instead, she didn't. She decided to be brave and to support her friend. I admire her more than I already did for that, and I already admired her. Blake's other co-lead in It Ends With Us also posted in support of her. For the love of God, read this. At Blake Lively, Red Heart. In an August statement posted to Instagram, which is now pinned on his page, Sklner previously defended Lively. He wrote on August 20th, "Hey everyone, I wanted to take a minute and address all this stuff swirling online. Colleen and the women of this cast stand for hope, perseverance, and for women choosing a better life for themselves. Vilifying the women who put so much of their heart and soul into making this film because they believe so strongly in its message seems counterproductive and detracts from what this film is about. It is, in fact, the opposite of the point. What may or may not have happened behind the scenes does not, and hopefully should not, detract from what our intentions were in making this film. It's been disheartening to see the amount of negativity being projected online. Someone very close to me has been struggling with a relationship that has mirrored Lily's closely. I feel a responsibility to bring this to life and help spread that message further. Prior to my involvement in this film, she had not heard of the book. It was only then that she read it. She credits Colleen's book and subsequently this film with saving her life. Trust me when I tell you, there isn't a single person involved in the making of this film that was not aware of the responsibility we had in making this. A responsibility that all the women who have experienced generational trauma, domestic abuse, or struggle with looking in the mirror and loving who they see. This movie is a harsh reality check for the men who need to get their shit together and take responsibility for themselves and their actions. This film is meant to inspire, it's meant to validate and recognize, it's meant to instill hope, it's meant to build courage and help people feel less alone. Ultimately, it's meant to spread love and awareness. It is not meant to, once again, make the women the bad guy. Let's move beyond that together. All I ask is that before you spread hate on the internet, ask yourself who it's helping. Ask yourself if your opinions are based on any fact, or if you simply want to be a part of something. Let's be a part of something better together, a part of a new story being written for women and all people everywhere. Lead with love and please be kind. Brandon." And so has the author of the book. Hoover shared her support for Lively on her Instagram story December 21st, saying, "At Blake Lively, you have been nothing but honest, kind, supportive, and patient since the day we met. Thank you for being exactly the human that you are. Never change, never wilt." And a picture of them hugging at the premiere and a link to the New York Times article. There are complaints and criticisms to be made about Colleen Hoover, but this is good of her. I appreciate that she is consistently on Blake's side in this. Another one I want to mention in terms of support Blake Lively has gotten, because a thing that I suspect was fed to us by Melissa Nathan and company, is that Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds are scabs. Something that, again, much like the not being friends with Leighton Meester, meaning that she's a mean girl bully thing, nobody has pointed me to anything actually proving that. I mean, yes, Ryan Reynolds seems to have written a scene, or at least lines in the rooftop scene, but I don't think we have any more evidence to go on that that happened during the strike than we do that Baldoni also must have broken the strike because he was on a movie that paused for a strike, right? And that was already enough for me. Like, I needed somebody to actually tell me that they had scabbed with any kind of proof, and they weren't able to provide that. And then I saw this, which to me tells me we can stop fucking worrying about whether or not they scabbed, because I personally am not a member of SAG AFTRA, which would be the union that would give a shit whether or not Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds scabbed, because it's the union that they're in. And SAG AFTRA released a statement in support of Blake Lively. So yay! Let yourself take that off your shoulders if you've been carrying it around as a grudge against Blake Lively. I do have the statement SAG AFTRA made in support of Blake Lively, which I feel like probably wouldn't have been made if she wasn't a member in good standing. These are startling and troubling allegations. Employees have every right to raise issues of concern or to file complaints. Retaliation for reporting misconduct or inappropriate behavior is illegal and wrong. We applaud Blake Lively's courage in speaking out on issues of retaliation and harassment, and for her request to have an intimacy coordinator for all scenes with nudity or sexual content. This is an important step that helps ensure a safe set. Let's keep going. Let's move on. It isn't just the Actors Union and her co-stars and the author of the book that It Ends With Us was based on. You can try really hard to let go of the opinion that Melissa Nathan selected for you about Blake not being well liked by other people in the industry. A former director also spoke up in favor of her. Blake's A Simple Favor director also came to her defense, writing on Twitter December 22nd, "I've now made 2 movies with Blake, and all I can say is she's one of the most professional, creative, collaborative, talented, and kind people I've ever worked with. She truly did not deserve any of this smear campaign against her. I think it's awful she was put through this. And so did the entire Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. Blake's BFFs and Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants co-stars penned a joint message, posted to Instagram December 22nd. As Blake's friends and sisters for over 20 years, we stand with her in solidarity as she fights back against the reported campaign waged to destroy her reputation. Throughout the filming of It Ends With Us, we saw her summon the courage to ask for a safe workplace for herself and colleagues on set, and we are appalled to read the evidence of a premeditated and vindictive effort that ensued to discredit her voice. Most upsetting is the unabashed exploitation of domestic violence survivors' stories to silence a woman who asked for safety. The hypocrisy is astounding. We are struck by the reality that even if a woman is as strong, celebrated, and resourceful as our friend Blake, she can face forceful retaliation for daring to ask for a safe working environment. We are inspired by our sister's courage to stand up for herself and others. For anyone seeking more information or engaging in this important conversation online, please read the full legal complaint in the investigative reporting by Megan Toohey, Mike McIntyre, and Julia Tate for the New York Times, America Ferrera, Amber Tamblyn, and Alexis Bledel. The Traveling Pants one makes me genuinely very happy. I really fucking loved those books. And I guess that means that I do have to amend, because I liked the movie okay, and I've been saying I didn't particularly like any of Blake Lively's acting projects. I had kind of forgotten she was in that. I do like that movie. It was largely because of America Ferrera, but I did like that movie. And here are two other statements I found rounded up in People, just to prove the kind of support that she's getting, and so that you have something to compare it against when we start to talk about some consequences that seem to be being faced by Baldoni. Art Johnson shared an impassioned defense of his sister-in-law in the comment section of a New York Times Instagram post detailing the filming and its own investigation into the behind-the-scenes turmoil. Her complaints were filed during the filming, the High School Musical alum, who is married to Blake's sister, Robin, wrote. On record, long before the public conflict, the cast unfollowed him for a reason. Read this article before spitting ignorance. His PR team was stellar, gross and disgusting, but highly effective. Read the article, their text message exchanges, and his PR campaign strategy to bury her by any means necessary. No one is without faults, but the public got played. Ryan Reynolds' frequent collaborator Sean Levy shared the New York Times investigation into the smear campaign on his Instagram stories, writing, "Proud to call @Blake Lively a friend." The one I really wanted to talk about in this section, though, is the one that Amber Heard was asked to give and provided to NBC. Because it kind of guts me that I feel like Amber Heard is probably just going to be asked to give a statement on this kind of thing every time it happens to another woman, and despite the fact that very few people were able or willing to make statements in support of Amber Heard, I feel like Amber Heard is the kind of person who is going to make statements when she's asked. I feel like even if Amber does eventually see more of a public shift in how people conceive of her, that a lot of other people are going to end up getting apologies sooner than she does, if she ever does. Honestly, I highly doubt she ever will get an actual widespread apology, because that would require too much admission of how wrong the people who stood against her during that defamation trial were. In an exclusive statement shared with NBC News, Heard, who lives in Spain, said, "Social media is the absolute personification of the classic saying, a lie travels halfway around the world before truth can get its boots on. I saw this firsthand and up close. It's as horrifying as it is destructive." Again, the same way that I think really highly of Jenny Slate for providing a statement, I think Amber even giving a comment at all really shows how brave she is, and that that's beautiful. And with Amber, I think it also speaks to and reminds us of how long she has cared about feminism and about supporting victims since way before she ever even met Johnny Depp. Now let's move into Justin Baldoni, who I have so far only seen defended by his lawyer and by gender traitor Jennifer Abel, who apparently made comments in a PR agent Facebook group attempting to defend herself, and then she later deleted them. I'm gonna start with the lawyer because that's the one I'm more sure is legitimate. And I'm gonna just pull from a write-up I really enjoyed from The Telegraph, since he technically responded to New York Times, but I read from that. We can bury them in the last video. In response to the complaint, Brian Friedman, Baldoni's lawyer, said it is shameful that Ms. Lively and her representatives would make such serious and categorically false accusations, and called her legal action yet another desperate attempt to fix her negative reputation, which was garnered from her own remarks and actions during the campaign for the film. interviews, and press activities that were observed publicly in real time and unedited, which allowed for the internet to generate their own views and opinions. In what started as a messy production and developed into the most extraordinary celebrity he said, she said of the year, Lively's complaint seems like a decisive one. In a way, the most remarkable aspect of the whole sorry saga is that Justin Baldoni thought he could take on the might of Hollywood's most wholesome and powerful cartel and win. In Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds' Hollywood, it always ends with them. And I'll just say again, we know, despite the fact that people do and still did have grievances with Blake Lively, this shit was not organic. Despite the claims made here, and also in a response that the lawyer gave to Amber Heard's statement, trying to pin that everybody just made their own opinions up on Blake Lively in a vacuum, and they didn't contribute to that at all. It is very clearly bullshit. An organic distaste for Blake Lively would not have amounted to the smear campaign that ended up happening against her, and also, it would not justify the working conditions that the smear campaign is retaliation for her reporting, and neither would the scab allegations if those were true. But again, nobody has presented those to me in a way that felt true. I will read those comments that are apparently from Jennifer Abel, but the other things I've been reading have been from news sources, and this is a Reddit post that was linked to me from a private Facebook group that I cannot verify and that apparently she later took down. I just want to level with you, this isn't the same level of, for sure this is real as a lot of the other things that I've read, but also Variety did cite this as if it was legitimate, and I do think Variety does more work to verify stuff than I am capable of on my YouTube channel in my bedroom. Linked in the description below as well. Like always, here is Jennifer Abel's apparent response to the New York Times write-up. Hi. I never thought the day would come when I needed to defend myself with my own peers, but this has certainly been an interesting and devastating, quite frankly, couple of days. So here we are. But here are the facts. No, I was never subpoenaed. I found out my private text messages and emails were included in the complaint after I received it on Friday night, and then New York Times contacted me an hour and a half after receipt. They had already reviewed the 80-page document and had questions prepared, and apparently also received thousands of pages of documents with our correspondence that we never saw. So it was clear this was a coordinated effort, but nothing we haven't seen before since I've been working in talent PR for over 15 years now. I had recently left my previous firm, at which I was still with during this campaign, with a team who all participated in the campaign and a boss who oversaw, and who had access to my work emails and work phone, so you can deduce from that what you will. What the cherry-picked messages don't include, although not shockingly, as it doesn't fit the narrative, is that there was no smear implemented, no negative press was ever facilitated, no social combat plan, although we were prepared for it, as it's our job to be ready for any scenario. But we didn't have to implement anything, because the internet was doing the work for us. Sure, we talked about it, contemplated if we needed certain things, flagged accounts that we needed to monitor, worked with a social team to help us stay on top of the narrative so we could act quickly if needed, and yes, we rejoiced and joked in the fact that fans were recognizing our clients' heart and work, without us having to do anything but keep our heads down and focus on positive interviews for our client. As the texts show, we sophomorically reveled and again joked privately to each other about the internet's feedback to the woman whose team was making our lives incredibly difficult over the course of the campaign. I'm human. The long hours, months of preparation on top of my day-to-day scope, it felt good to see that although we were prepared, we didn't have to do anything over the top to protect our client. Incredibly difficult, you say? In what way? Funny you should ask. I was notified at the start of the campaign that the opposing team had been planting horrible stories about my client as a failsafe if my client did not comply with the demands set forth for the campaign. Which is why we brought on Crisis, as it's not something that I do. My sole job was to put together interviews, screening opportunities, and speaking opportunities for my client in support of the film, a standard scope of work. I did my job. Now, what kind of woman would work against another woman who was a victim of all the things being claimed? Thanks for asking. After reviewing the evidence, facts, hard proof that countered every single thing that was being claimed and demanded at the start of production, I made a choice to stand by my client of almost 5 years, who had dedicated his life to the equal treatment of others, especially women, who had no incidents of negative treatment of others, and who had a wonderful community and team at Wayfarer, who all held the same moral fortitude and lived their life accordingly. As representatives, we all have to make that choice. So I did that to the best of my ability, and I felt good about our efforts. Is my client perfect? No. In fact, he says that he's not perfect so constantly to the point I tell him he needs to be less self-deprecating because it can be taken the wrong way. Are Blake's feelings valid? It's not my position to say or speculate what she was feeling in these moments that she claims, and I would never slam a woman for speaking her truth. But at the end of the day, if it's not the truth and there is evidence that proves otherwise, then as a representative, I have to do what I feel is right as well. I feel like I need to go use mouthwash. Not only is this ridiculous and a big nothing statement, does Blake have the right to her feelings? And then not even answering the question, oh my god, how do you sleep at night? It just strikes me as particularly soulless. But that's a thing we've already known about Jennifer and her bestie, Melissa. That's not really news. What else is interesting to me about that comment, though, is that, the gender trader was getting sued either way, I'm sure. But the legal complaint that was filed after Blake's filing mentions that Jennifer Abel is still trying to blame her online, which seems to be in reference to this, I think. So it looks like Jennifer Abel might be diagnosably incapable of continuing to just constantly make her own bed over and over again. A lot of what she said in there feels very disproved in the complaint by Blake. You can't brag about planting stories and say, yeah, I hired you because you're the best at planting stories, and then say, oh no, I had nothing to do with the stories being planted. Respect my intelligence at least a little bit, Jen. But also, yeah, that's what I meant earlier when I said there's another legal complaint. Baldoni's getting double sued. This second complaint is not as long as Blake's complaint, but is too long for me to read in this video. Do you want me to read the whole thing in a video like I did for the Blake one? Do you want just the highlights? Let me know, maybe. But the legal complaint that gets filed after Blake's here is by Justin's former publicist, other than Abel. The one who is Abel's former employer, who she mentioned in those comments. I want Stephanie Jones to win because I want Wayfarer to get sued out of existence, and I want Justin Baldoni's reputation to be accurate. But also, from very light research, I have not looked very far into Stephanie Jones, but she does seem like probably a just as hard or maybe more difficult to defend person as Blake Lively, so let me say I'm not fully throwing my lot in here. I'm just saying in this one specific case, I really hope Stephanie takes him for all he's worth. I'm gonna read from Jezebel here. If you're having a bad Christmas, allow me to offer a little consolation. Justin Baldoni is definitely having a worse one. Days after his former co-star Blake Lively filed an 80-page complaint against him, alleging he'd sexually harassed her throughout production, then launched a coordinated PR smear campaign against her in an attempt to, as private messages reveal, bury her, a second lawsuit arrived on Christmas Eve. On Tuesday, Steph Jones, who owns the New York-based public relations firm JonesWorks, accused her former client of breaching their contract, which required Baldoni to pay her $25,000 per month. According to Jones, Baldoni prematurely parted ways with the firm in August, just a few months into a year-long deal, after his publicist, Jennifer Abel, left the company to launch her own firm. Abel and publicist Melissa Nathan are also named in Jones's suit. They're accused of creating the smear campaign against Lively and blaming Jones for the fallout. Also alleged in the suit is that Abel took documents from Jones' work to start her own public relations firm, and that Jones was removed from Baldoni's representation during the It Ends With Us campaign. Abel and Nathan, Jones alleges, then, quote, secretly coordinated with Baldoni and Wayfarer to implement an aggressive media smear campaign against Baldoni's film co-star Blake Lively, end quote. An amusing series of text messages alleged to have been sent by Abel included in the filing perhaps reveal her true feelings towards Baldoni. They include, I can't stand him, he's so pompous, a men's retreat during release, is he crazy? Abel wrote in one message sent in January 2024. And being off the grid for the summer because he's just so overworked, calm down, you're not that important and nobody gives a shit how hard your life is. I do think this argument kind of makes sense. Like, she was kind of framed as having something to do with Baldoni's smear against Lively, that she was apparently explicitly being told by Jamie Heath that she wasn't able to respond to negative press about Lively to try to nip it in the bud. And she was apparently being explicitly told by Jamie Heath that she was not to respond to negative press about Lively to try to quell the rumors. Also, yeah, it does seem like she stole both clients, and then also I would believe that follows also she would steal documents on her way out. There are texts that were obtained through that, I assume the same subpoena that they got the information for Blake Lively through, that points to coordinated campaigns against both Blake and Stephanie Jones of Jones Works. I'm far more interested in Stephanie Jones's complaint as it will affect Blake, as it backs Blake's up, and as it forces information about these tactics out into the light than I am in terms of, like, the corporate espionage of it all, I guess. But also, I do just want to flag, this is a kind of a wild story to be wrapping 2024 up with. That other legal complaint, though, is not the only consequence that Baldoni seems to have faced in the last week. He was also dropped by his agent, who also represents Blake Lively. But there were also some more consequences, and I do want to run through a few of them. Starting with Liz Plank, the token woman on the Man Enough podcast. She resigned. I had already been seeing rumors that she had distanced herself by the time I filmed my last video, but I wasn't sure how substantiated they were, so I didn't mention it then. But she has now officially left, according to a statement on her Instagram, where she wrote, "I'm writing to you today to let you know that I have had my representatives inform Wayfarer that I will no longer be hosting the Man Enough podcast. Thank you for trusting me with your hearts and stories, for holding space for mine, and for making this show what it was. I will miss you, the listeners, so much. I love what this community created together with every fiber of my being, and that's because of you. As this chapter closes for me, I remain committed to the values we've built together. Thank you for being here, for trusting me, and for being by my side for the last 4 years. We all deserve better, and I know that together we can create it. I will have more to share soon as I continue to process everything that has happened. In the meantime, I will continue to support everyone who calls out injustice and holds the people standing in their way accountable." I've got mixed feelings about this. I think it's objectively a good thing that she is leaving, but I also can't feel too impressed by this, like, published feminist author only just now figuring out that this thing that she's been on for a long time has such slimy vibes. Again, I've only seen one episode of Man Enough and I already got there, and I'm just some lesbian talking to my phone in my bedroom. But I do still respect that she left. It saves her from getting referred to as another gender traitor in this video. I do agree with her that her audience deserves better, though, and I hope she starts to provide that. You know who else thinks we deserve better, though? The Vital Voices Global Partnership, who had previously awarded Baldoni with their Voices of Solidarity Award just earlier this same December. The double lawsuit part is fun, losing his agent is fun, but I have to say, personally, on my little petty feminist level, this is my favorite so far of the consequences that Baldoni seems to be facing. They took his award back. They ripped the good boy cookies right out of his hand. In an Instagram post about his Vital Voices award earlier this month, Baldoni wrote, "My hope is that we can teach our boys, while they are still young, that vulnerability is a strength. Sensitivity is a superpower, and empathy makes them powerful. Being a boy and a man is amazing and nothing to apologize for, and to value all the beautiful and complicated parts of them that make them human," Baldoni added in his caption. His post read like a personal mission statement. Boys should be strong, brave, kind. I believe with all my heart that once our boys learn to be safe spaces for themselves, our world will finally be a safe space for everyone. By Christmas Eve, Baldoni deleted his post after Vital Voices scrubbed him from its website Monday. And the official rescinding statement from Vital Voices, the Voices of Solidarity Award honors remarkable men who have shown courage and compassion in advocating on behalf of women and girls. On December 9th, 2024, we recognized Justin Baldoni with this award. On Saturday, December 21st, we learned through news reports about a lawsuit brought by Blake Lively against Mr. Baldoni, his publicists, and others that is disturbing and alleges abhorrent conduct. The communications among Mr. Baldoni and his publicist included in the lawsuit and the PR effort they indicate are alone contrary to the values of Vital Voices and the spirit of the award. We have notified Mr. Baldoni that we have rescinded this award. I think this rules. I would love to see, for example, No More, the organization that he partnered with for a lot of his promotion of this film. I would love to see them also do similar. I think that would be great. I think more organizations like this need to make an effort to blacklist people who use them for their own benefit when they are actually predators of some sort. If you want to give awards out to allies, you need to be willing to take them back, I think, and I think that this is great. I love it, genuinely. Don't let people use your organization for cover while they refuse to learn or grow as a person. You don't have to let them do that. It is unfair to the people you are trying to help to let people who have no interest in bettering themselves do that at the expense of your audience. I can't get over the fact that this man who got to give an entire TED Talk about Me Too also ran his set in such a way where his lead actress needed to threaten to walk in order to get just basic industry protections. If he believed in any of the things that he was selling, there would have already been an intimacy coordinator extremely involved in every scene where he was set to portray domestic violence. I can't get over that. I don't want to. And I'm glad that at least one organization that hands out good boy cookies is willing to yank them the fuck back when they see this kind of shit. There is a lot more to talk about with all of this. I'm planning a whole video that's just like how to spot a hate train, what to do next time this starts happening maybe, and I wanted to give a few updates about this before I continued working too much on that one. And I'm not sure if this video is much shorter than the other one now that it's all done, but I did want to offer at least a condensed version of what we talked about in the last video. You've also probably noticed that I did not spend as much time going over me not personally being much of a fan of Blake Lively in this video, and that's because I feel like we're at a point where that's not really relevant to the conversation that I want to be having. My like or dislike of this person is not relevant or helpful or useful. It genuinely does not matter how I feel about somebody on a personal level for me to believe that they do not deserve abuse or harassment or retaliation for reporting workplace harassment or bad working conditions. Blake Lively not deserving the abuse that she got either on that set or in retaliation is the crux of this issue. Nobody has to change their feelings on Blake Lively unless their feelings were somehow, I hate her and I hate her so much that she deserves abuse, in which case, yeah, re-examine that. But if your feelings are just that you don't really like Blake Lively, that's okay. That doesn't need to change. That can coexist with knowing that she does not deserve this. There are justified reasons to criticize Blake Lively. Her working with Woody Allen comes to mind, especially her plantation wedding comes to mind. She had a storefront with some kind of antebellum themed name. I really do not like and do not endorse her romanticization of all of that, especially as a white woman. It is bad, it is stupid, it is wrong. She seems to know now that at least the plantation wedding aspect of it all was wrong and has said that she regrets it. That is not for me to forgive anybody for. I in no way think that black women need to be on the forefront defending a woman who got married on a plantation, and I really hope that that does not somehow come across in what I'm saying. Me deciding not to spend a bunch of time focusing on those things is in no way me attempting to minimize the kind of harm that that kind of ignorance causes when it comes from privileged white women. I hope that I'm able to express in a way that will be trusted by my audience without me having to caveat every single time I mention Blake Lively that people do have valid reasons to dislike or distrust her, and that they're just rarely the things that were really brought up most often during the smear campaign. What I'm concerned about much more than people criticizing Blake Lively for having a history of racism is when people are concerned about the mean girl thing, or the interviews that were recirculated from 10 years ago when it was very convenient for a man for them to be recirculated to discredit her and protect his own image so that she couldn't come out against the treatment that he put her through. And I also think a lot of the times when everybody else is saying they both suck and therefore this is all fine and we don't really need to care or feel bad, what it means is more like it's too uncomfortable for me to ask myself why I was so desperate for a witch hunt, so I'm going to continue to talk about this, and I'm going to continue to participate in the witch hunt, but I'm going to say that they were both bad while I keep doing it because I think that makes me sound more reasonable. But I don't think it does sound particularly reasonable. I don't think boiling down that list of complaints that Blake had about her working conditions to unsafe vibes, or worse, like a list of demands as if she's some kind of diva, is reasonable. I don't think that it's particularly reasonable to have been super concerned about Blake Lively saying congratulations on your little bump and not really care about things like, I don't know, Justin Baldoni literally saying he's sorry for anything he's ever said or done to hurt his wife in their literal wedding vows, which I do find more damning. So while I am saving a lot of my how we can maybe see this coming for next time ideas for its own video, and for those of you who were here with me in the Nuance Corner suspecting this, I would love to hear the things that tipped you off, especially ones that might apply when they are being employed by somebody other than Melissa Nathan, though I think at this point I am just going to be very suspicious of anybody who hires Melissa Nathan. That's all going to be its own video, but to close out here today, I want to talk about what I do think a reasonable response is to having fallen for something like this, which is the response that I am seeing most often in my comment section on my last video about this. The most reasonable response to having fallen for one of these hate trains is to want to re-examine your opinion and make sure that it doesn't happen again in the future. And I think maybe a way to do that is to make sure you're kind of holding your opinions in a little bit more of an airtight box than you might already be keeping them in, because a common theme I'm seeing from a lot of people is that they had at first thought that this was wrong or overkill, but then they eventually bought in because everybody else was so insistent with it. Which is, I mean, not to be cute, but literally their job. That is literally the job of people like Jennifer Abel and Melissa Nathan. These women did their job, and they are very, very good at that job. And part of that job was flooding the zone with tabloid articles that were really just write-ups of whatever mean tweets about Blake Lively that Justin Baldoni and or Melissa Nathan and her team wanted to amplify that day. And then you see that as a headline from somewhere, and that kind of does legitimate it a little bit in your mind, even if it is the Daily Dot or whatever. Oh, everyone thinks this. And then maybe some content creators that you like also thought, oh, everyone thinks this. So they went and created maybe hours worth of content validating what they thought everybody already thought. And maybe they did it in the form of like a 2-hour video they kept calling a documentary and pretending to point to multiple points of view without actually taking the side of the woman who they were participating in the hate train on. Maybe they did a bunch of little short form videos shitting on Blake. Maybe it was a combination of the two. Maybe you didn't even watch any of them, but you just kept seeing so many of them on your page that you got frustrated at the idea of Blake Lively, and you were more receptive to the next thing you saw about how she was a terrible, irredeemable mean girl. A lot of the same people who fell for this Blake Lively thing fell for the exact same thing during the Depp vs. Heard trial. And I do personally think that falling for this twice should be fairly discrediting without like a legitimate and genuine apology. But at least it does give you as a viewer some information that you can and should use to hold up how seriously you should be taking somebody's opinion about someone and whether or not you should just go with whatever popular bot campaign told them was winning in the marketplace of ideas. So I think part of making sure that you don't have an opportunity to fall as easily for something like this in the future would be seeing who is doubling down and trying to make their first content seem reasonable even in the light of this new information. See if literally anybody actually apologizes for the content that they've made now that they have new information. And then also, even with an apology, maybe rank how seriously you take the things they tell you in the future based on how easily they fall for stuff like this. And rank your own reading and your own interpretation of that reading at the top, even above mine. I am more than happy to be here and to try to help to make sense of and explain this and things like this. I've said this before in videos, but a founding principle of my channel ever since before I even started was that I wanted to be somebody who could do things like Princess Weeks and Leeja Miller did by making videos when the Depp vs. Heard trial itself was still happening that not only made me feel validated about things that were legitimately crazy making, but that also genuinely likely did change people's minds and hearts. And I say it had to change people's minds and hearts because if people have told me that I have changed their mind or heart about Amber Heard, there is absolutely no way that those videos did not. I'm going to link to both of them in the description below, as well as to Medusone's excellent coverage of Depp vs. Heard. If you've ever been remotely confused by any aspect of my support for Amber Heard, how I square anything against anything that you are remembering either from watching the trial yourself or from watching other content creators respond to the trial. Please go watch Medusone's videos. The series starts with one called Amber Heard is an Unambiguous Victim, and it is incredibly comprehensive. I will never do anything nearly that in-depth regarding the evidence that both did and did not make it into the trial, because I don't have to, because Jasmine already did, and the video is fantastic. Please go watch it. I do plan on speaking more about Amber Heard in the future, which is likely already obvious. Longtime viewers already know as much. I bring her up all the time, and that's never going to change. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much to my lovely Patreon supporters, whose names you can see on the screen right now. Patreon friends get a couple extra videos from me a month and also just really help me support myself financially. I make videos full-time, not out of confidence or out of having any safety net, but out of being too disabled to work for anybody but myself. And it's working out pretty well so far for my first year. So it is a bigger help than I can even say. When people support me through the Patreon, through the Ko-fi, which I have for one-time tips and donations if you're interested in a way to do that. Thank you so much to everybody who has supported me at all through any of that, through the GoFundMe I had to do earlier this year, by sending me money directly. Thank you so much to everybody who has supported me in other ways too, like by watching my videos all the way through to the end, like you just did, by liking my videos, suggesting me, talking about me in kind ways on Reddit, and for over 10,000 of you subscribing to my channel, which I know I already mentioned, but God, that means more to me than I can even say. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again soon.